Hey friends, welcome to the Arable Leader podcast. You are going to really enjoy this. I'm speaking to a friend, Dan Lovinger, and what you're going to hear is someone who is honest and humble, who has become wise. So listen in, take out a pad and a pen and take some notes, and you're going to find things about how to sell your concept and idea. You're going to hear some wisdom about education and about the political situation we find ourselves in. This is the Arable Leader podcast. I'm Karl Martin, and we're exploring true, brave, kind, curious leadership, leading from your soul. Hey friends and listeners, welcome to the Arable Leader podcast. I'm Karl Martin, and I'm really excited to be able to introduce today one of my friends, Dan Lovinger, who until very recently, you may have seen this in the press, was president of Olympic ad sales for NBC Universal. That's a mouthful, Dan, but I think it means you're the boss of all the money that comes in for the Olympics for NBC. So welcome, Dan, and let's kick off by saying you have had a career in the media, but I think you have a passion, a lifelong passion for sports. Am I right?
That is right. Yeah, I grew up playing. I've got 4 boys who all played at various levels, different sports. So I've been around sport or many sports for a long time.
So just so that we can judge you, give us your teams. Who do you follow?
Well, I am a lifelong Yankee fan, so it's good to be back.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I know who you follow, and that's okay. I get it. And I'm a tortured New York Giants football fan as well. And
do you do basketball or not so much on the basketball?
I'm not a huge professional basketball fan, but I like the college game a lot. I think March Madness is one of the all-time great moments for sports fans, and it brings the casual fan in, and everybody gets excited. So I'm a bigger college basketball fan, I think.
And you're a golfer of repute. I mean, I played with you. You can hit a ball.
I've played with you, and you can hit a ball further and harder. I enjoy the game. I actually grew up about 4 houses away was one of the better golf courses in the country, and I used to hop the fence and play that course without a membership, but that's where I taught myself how to play when I was probably
I love that. It's like the confessional. I used to hop the fence, cheat, play without pay. I love that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. But it's a great game.
So, and you and I have had these conversations before, but sport has so many leadership lessons attached to it, so many opportunities to learn leadership and grow in leadership. Talk me through one or two of those for you.
There are a lot of similarities between maybe managing a team in sport and managing a team in business. And I think that the biggest similarities I see are around how to motivate. If you're a team manager for the Yankees or the Dodgers, or you're a team manager for the NBC Olympics team, your job is to figure out what makes each of your players tick. And oftentimes, I think, particularly in business, you're told that you need to treat everybody the same. You need to not show favoritism, which is different, 2 different things. Certainly favoritism is probably not something you want to be doing a ton of in the business world or the sport world. But treating everybody the same makes no sense to me, because you can't truly get the most out of people if you're not understanding what makes them tick. And if you know what makes them tick, then you have to treat them differently to sort of motivate them. And I think we fall into that trap often. We don't want to be accused of that favoritism, but favoritism isn't treating people differently. Favoritism is treating somebody for whatever reason you like with some sort of preferential treatment. And that's different. So the first lesson, I think, is that you need to understand what motivates people and treat each person differently to get the most out of them. And that's what I think the truly great managers or captains of teams do.
Well, it's highly relational, isn't it? I mean, all leadership is relational. So the ability to read a room, read a person, understand what's going to inspire them, what's going to move them is foundational.
And it's interesting too, because I think, oftentimes you associate team leadership or the captain of the team with perhaps the loudest person. And often I think the best leaders are sometimes the quietest ones, because they're the ones observing before they're, pumping the group up. And there's a moment in a time, I think, for that sort of thing, the pump up. But for the most part, I think some of the greatest leaders are the ones that are sometimes the quietest. And then, understanding, and a former boss once told me this, and I really didn't take her seriously until I started sort of applying what she was saying and watching. And she said, your team is listening to every word you speak. Even just the quiet implications that you might not even know are there. They're taking to heart. And so you have to really think about what you're saying without sounding stilted, in the conversation. But they're listening and they're watching too. And they're watching body language, the nonverbal signals.
Yes.
And so I think particularly on the athletic field, you see how a quarterback responds when a struggling wide receiver drops a pass. And that makes all the difference. If it's a really, nice, okay, we're going to get him, versus, the head's down and he's shaking his head. I mean, you really have to pay attention to how you carry yourself as a leader, because people are following.
Yeah, and we've had this conversation often, Dan, but the idea that leadership in any team, business or sport is very like parenting. Your kids will pick up on who you are before they pick up on what you tell them to do. And so you will find yourself disciplining sometimes the things you dislike in yourself, because they're just catching stuff. It is like a goldfish bowl, isn't it, of support and challenge as you build a family, and as you build a business, and as you build a team. It's all relational, and it all starts with the key person, or the leader, or the manager, or the boss.
Yeah, totally agree.
So let's dive into the Olympics, because I find the Olympics fascinating, and what a job that you had to be around that kind of. I guess one of the highlights of every 2 years in the global calendar. It feels to me like in an area of negative leadership news, negative role models, I always feel that the Olympic season and the Olympic spirit offers like a breakwater of stunning human achievement, and full of stories of perseverance and success and failure and glorious failure sometimes. But maybe you, as someone who had a ringside seat for some of these things, could give us a couple of Paris highlights and things that you went, wow, maybe not everyone saw that, but this was incredible.
Yeah, I think there were some of the more obvious ones, which you kind of have to point out, which, you look at somebody like Katie Ledecky, who very quietly, by the way, Katie is not a bragger. I mean, she just gets in the pool and swims faster for longer than any other woman. And I think she won her fourth gold medal, which was in the 1500 meter, which, when you think about 16 years of dominance at an event that is that grueling, that's just a stunning achievement. And the way she does it, in the classy way, it just makes it even more profound. And then you look at the fresh story in the pool with Léon Marchand, the Frenchman, who came out of nowhere and also won 4 gold medals. But I think what was really interesting about that was, I think he turned on what was a fairly apathetic, French country. The French weren't all that excited about the Olympics being in Paris. Many of the Parisians left town for the first week, and all of a sudden Marchand started winning and the town started filling up again. And the patriotism that the French started showing was really, cool to see.
It must have been cool to be. Were you in the arena for that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was in the arena for 2 of his golds. The first one,
because watching. I mean, I'm a bit of an imbecile when it comes to swimming, but watching the breaststroke and watching them clapping and chanting every stroke, that must have gone right through you.
It was really, really inspiring to see this guy who I'm sure, those that know swimming figured he was probably a top contender. Obviously, you don't win 4 golds just out of the blue, but I don't think the French people were ready for it. And it was really, really inspiring to see them get so excited for him and for all the Olympians. They started showing up in droves. So that was really fun. The Simone Biles story, you have to mention. Here's a woman who, had all eyes on her, probably felt that she had something to prove, even though she really didn't. And she came out and she proved it. She led the Americans to the team gold. And then in the individuals, she actually hurt her ankle and competed on a bad ankle and still managed to win bronze and graciously, applaud, the gold and silver medal winners. So she was fantastic. But, one of the things I think, Karl, that gets overlooked about the Olympic movement, we try really hard at NBC to make sure it continues to grow, is the Paralympic movement. And when you want to, point towards inspiration, and soaring achievement, and you do it across virtually every athlete there. I mean, just being there is an incredible achievement, and the way you see the Paralympians support one another is really, really cool. There's a young guy from America called Ezra Freck who was favored to win gold in the high jump and the 100-meter. Was a little bit less of a lock for him. And he won both. He's attending USC and running track in an able-bodied scholarship, first ever. And that to me is really, really inspiring. And when you think about 4 years from now in LA, Ezra's going to be a big story in the LA Paralympics and continue to drive the message forward that, Paralympian athletes are every bit as competitive and deserving of, the credit as the able-bodied Olympians.
And it's great to hear, isn't it? And it's great. It's more than just escapism, but it is a little bit of escapism in a world where so many of the other arenas of leadership and of human achievement are so broken. To be able to see people in a very pure way, not just competing and doing their best, but loving one another and being there for one another and having a kind of collective spirit. That's powerful, and in a kind of cynical world, it's a powerful thing to be able to say, this is good, this is wholesome, and it's good stuff.
I'll add one more for you, by the way, from just the NBC Olympic team perspective. We were facing, a very pivotal moment in the Olympic movement. And when you think about NBC and you think about the role the Olympics play for that company, it's the heart and soul of the company. NBC has had the rights to broadcast the Olympics since 1988, and their rights extend all the way through 2032. And we'd gone through 3 games that were starting to show some real signs of duress because you had 3 straight games based in Asia, which is a little far away for the American public to get too excited about. 2 of them through pandemics. The final one in Beijing, the Winter Games of 2022, were tough because of the geopolitical situation as well. So people started wondering whether the Olympics mattered. And there was a lot of pressure on the team, from the production team that Molly Solomon led to the business team, the P&L of it all that Gary Zankel leads, all the way through the sales group that I lead, marketing. And what was really inspiring was we all had our version of a plan that we thought would get us to a good place. We all knew that Paris would be a great Olympic venue. But until it all starts coming together and you see the success of a sales plan and a marketing plan juxtaposed to the success of a production plan, you bring in a little bit of Snoop Dogg for the magic fairy dust on all of it.
Quite a lot of Snoop Dogg.
And, you talk about achievement, and, the press, I think, was quite complimentary, and certainly the viewing public loved it because the ratings were there. And anecdotally, you hear about it from your friends and family, and you get comments like, for the first time, and I can't remember ever, our family sat and watched something together. And that kind of achievement, in my world anyway, because this is what we do for a living, I'm not, saving the planet. It feels really, really good. So that's a little less probably inspiring than winning a gold medal, but to us it felt like it.
Yeah, but it's real, and we can relate to it because we're all looking for victories in our everyday lives and in our working lives. Let's change the subject just a little bit. You are at heart, you're a salesman. I mean, I don't mean that negatively. That's what you do. Good. By trade, you're a very good one. I often get questions when I'm coaching people, I've got a great idea. How do I pitch this in a way that people can believe it and buy into it? And so talk to us a little bit about that. Seth Godin, I love some of his quotes. And he once said that people don't believe what you tell them. They sometimes believe what you show them. They usually believe what their friends tell them. They always believe what they tell themselves. So talk to me about how you get in the middle of what someone is telling themselves and sell a concept or an idea or an opportunity to them, because I think it will help other people who are listening.
Well, I think, getting back to being a salesman, my mom always knew I was going to be a salesman because I used to take the rocks out of my neighbor's driveway and then try and sell them back to him.
Brilliant.
And I had a little bit of success with that. But I actually never thought I wanted to be in sales. When I was coming out of college, I thought to myself, I need to go work on Wall Street because that's what notable professions are. And I did that actually for a few years, and I was bored stiff. I went back to school. I came out of graduate school and kind of fell into a sales role, my first job in the media business at Turner Broadcasting, but had to convince myself that it wasn't the cheesiest thing in the world. I always thought of salespeople as, they'll slap you on the back and they'll buy you a lunch or whatever, and then you'll sign a deal. And that's not at all what it turned out for me to be. And the way I convinced myself that I could be a good salesperson was I thought more of it as a consulting job. And I'm not sure consultants are any more noble than salespeople.
Well thought of.
Although I do have, my oldest son is a consultant now, and I have a lot of respect for him and what he does. But to me, consulting seemed to be a little bit more cerebral maybe, and therefore it was okay. And what I really thought about, though, was if I could walk into a client's office and I could think about their challenges the way they're probably thinking about them and put whatever it was I was selling in the context of solving their problem, then I would probably be more successful than the guy or the girl that came before and after me. And the minute I start showing that I've got some chops and I understand their business, they'll have more time for me. And that'll differentiate me from everybody else. And so ultimately, to me, I've never thought of myself as a salesperson. I've thought of myself more maybe as a marketing consultant. And the people I look to bring on board, my teams, you need a healthy balance of different types of personalities. But ultimately, if they're not business curious, they're probably not going to be successful. And so that curiosity that forces you to ask questions and drive to what ultimately makes the customer's business a success is what makes you ultimately good at what you do. And so you have to have this thirst, this interest, this want to ask. So if I'm going to visit the CMO of Taco Bell, it's really not about, how can I help him sell more tacos? It's about what are his franchisees' challenges, the business of his business.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
And you ask those questions, you meet the franchisees, and they'll say, well, Dan, turnover's a problem. I turn over 100% of my store team every year. And that costs me. So then you start thinking about, all right, what are my products that can help them solve the turnover problem? And pretty soon you're in deeper and you have better success. And that's the type of thinking I try and do.
That's brilliant. I mean, so if you're in that boat and you're listening into this, learn from that. That's so powerful. How do you leave someone else feeling about their stuff when you have left the room? How do they feel about what they need to do? And how can you come alongside them and support them in what they're trying to accomplish in the world? Stop trying to sell things to people. Start trying to help people with the things that they're dealing with. Massively powerful. And connected to that, I mean, you're not a salesman. You're a media consultant. You're an advertising marketing consultant, but you're also a learner. And one of the things I love about you is, for you, every day is a school day. We always have really intelligent conversations, which mostly come from your side because you're reading some interesting things and you're thinking some interesting things. So, what are you thinking about right now? What are you reading right now? What's maybe scaring you right now or intriguing you? What are you curious about? I think people would love to know.
You know, obviously with the election coming so soon, I've been trying to read on a number of issues. And I think, you know, if you're trying to cram for the exam now, it's probably a little bit late. But when I sort of started thinking back about some of the better things I've read, you know, I think about like Thomas Friedman and Michael Mandelbaum. They wrote a book called That Used to Be Us. And it's really a discussion of America and unfortunately some of the decline in America post-Cold War, where we got a little bit complacent. We let globalization and the IT revolution get ahead of us. We ran up chronic deficits that made it harder to compete. We excessively consumed energy as a nation, which puts us in a compromised position to the energy providers. And then ultimately, you know, they write about the decline of education in America. And I think that that's a real problem. The quality of the education, the commitment to the education, not by the educators. You know, you can't really blame the educators because unfortunately we don't value educators in our society the way we value investment bankers. It's perverse to think about how little educators get compensated and supported for what they do. But it's left us with this conundrum, or this puzzle to solve. You know, how do we expect our society to think properly about the issues that are being teed up right now in this election cycle when we haven't given them the tools to process it, right?
100%.
And Friedman and Mandelbaum write about this really eloquently. It's a great read. As I said, it's called That Used to Be Us.
Well, I wasn't going to go deep into this, Dan, but let's you raised it, so let's do politics just for a moment. I'm not going to go close to asking you who you voted for and why, but I am interested in. Joseph de Maistre once said, "A nation gets the government it deserves." He wrote it in French, so that's just a loose translation. But a nation gets the government that it deserves, which is fascinating. I don't think any intelligent conversation I've had over the last 3 years believes that the state that we're in right now is a really healthy state. I don't think any intelligent conversation is telling me that one side or the other are to blame. I think we're all kind of culpable in this. So I'm not going to talk about the right and the left and the radical polarization of society and how we got there. But I'm really interested in, what do we do in the medium to long term to begin to fix something that seems so powerful and so broken, so that we're not sitting here in 25, 30, 40 years time going, same old, same old. What would your response to that be, particularly around the education piece?
Yeah, I think it starts with education. I've always believed that. But I think education and quote unquote fixing education in America is a generational problem. It's not going to happen in 2, 5, or 10 years. in order for education to improve, it has to be valued across the board. And I think there are just too many large pockets of families that don't value education, or can't value education because to educate their children might mean that their children can't be working and providing.
It's so costly, right?
It's too costly, and the benefit isn't there. So, I haven't thought this through enough to tell you that I have the answer, but the key to solving a lot of our issues as a nation is in education. And it doesn't just rely on the student or the teacher, but it relies on the entirety of the family, whoever is supporting that journey. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a point in America anyway where there isn't this high value on education universally. We need it. We need whoever's supporting the journey of the student to understand that there is a payout for everyone, themselves included, in supporting education, or else we're going to end up pouring a lot of money and resources into trying to solve a problem that doesn't have a willing participant.
Yeah. And it's super helpful, isn't it, to have these longer term, deeper conversations. I would often say that a problem only continues to exist in the absence of the right conversation. And these are exactly the right conversations for us to be having, not trying to work out whether this candidate or this candidate is the right or wrong candidate, although that's important and significant, but actually looking down the track and saying, what if we could have thousands and thousands of incredibly wise, incredibly smart, incredibly noble candidates coming up through the education system, where everyone gets to play and everyone gets an opportunity to become the best that they can be? You have a nation that's very powerful and very wise and very strong at that point. And you have leaders in every arena of culture coming up at that point. So that's the conversation I think we need to have. So here's the final question. Dan, I think I know you to be a true, brave, kind, and curious leader. And I know that your friends would back that up, and I've met some of them, and they do. What is the source for you of that true, brave, kind, curious leadership, as a parent, as a husband, as an executive? Where does it all come from for you?
We've talked a little bit about this, but I don't think we've ever gotten to the root of it. And my father passed away. He was too young. He was 62. But when I think about my dad, and what's interesting for those of you that lose somebody important, at least my experience is part of, I think, the mourning process is, over time, you kind of, your brain retrains itself to only think about the good times that you had with somebody. And, I don't think of the way my dad suffered through his illness anymore. I think about just the moments that stood out, whether, it was a great family moment or a teaching moment, or, I was just watching him be who he was. But in any event, my father was one of these people that was everything and more: true, brave, kind, curious, generous, and integrous in a way that I've never encountered since. And so as time has continued to go on, I think it's just my natural inclination to want to be more and more like him. And what's really fascinating in validating, as you leave a job like I just have, inevitably you're going to get emails and texts and different forms of communication. And you start wondering whether the person you were modeling yourself to be is the person that people saw you as.
That's
and
good.
Other than when you die or you leave a company, you really don't have that opportunity. People don't speak directly to you about what kind of person you were to them. But what's been very, very rewarding and validating is the consistency of the notes all talk about those qualities that I just mentioned my dad had, and it makes me feel great. I've never felt better about sort of my body of, so I wouldn't even call it work. It's just the essence of who I've become, because everybody is telling me I am who I thought I was, which is, I guess, nice.
And isn't that great? And it's true. You know, you and I have known each other for a while, and I've seen you even grow in some of those areas. And isn't it a shame that we don't tell each other unless we leave or we die?
Yeah.
Then it may be too late. So there's a little bit of a moral, isn't it? Let's tell people what's great about them. Watch them rise. Watch watch them fill up as they do, and watch them become everything that they want to become by telling them. Dan, as always, it's a massive pleasure to be in the same room as you, even if we're not in the same room, we're on the same studio room. But let's speak again soon, and great luck and joy in whatever you do next. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You've been watching The Arable Leader with Karl Martin. Subscribe for more episodes with great leaders. And you can also listen to The Arable Leader wherever you get your podcasts. For more resources for leading in a healthy way, visit arableco.com and check out Karl's new book, The Cave, the Road, the Table, and the Fire.